The waves of the Atlantic crash endlessly against the shores of North Carolina. On a narrow strip of land known as Roanoke Island, the wind whispers through the marsh grass, carrying the echoes of a question that has haunted historians for more than 4 centuries. What happened to the lost colony? It is a story of hope and ambition, of courage and failure, of dreams carved into wilderness and swallowed by the unknown. But above all, it is a mystery that has refused to die. The year is 1584. England stands restless beneath the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, a nation rising to power, but locked in fierce rivalry with Spain. The world beyond the Atlantic remains largely unexplored by English eyes, yet filled with stories of gold, fertile lands, and unimaginable opportunity. The Queen's trusted courtier, Sir Walter Raleigh, dreams of establishing a new English foothold in the Americas. To him, this is more than conquest. It is destiny. He imagines an empire stretching across the ocean, bringing English civilization, Protestant faith, and new wealth to a world still untouched by the crown. When Raleigh receives a royal charter, the promise is clear: to discover, search, find out, and view such remote heathen and barbarous lands not actually possessed by any Christian prince. Yet Raleigh himself never set sail. Instead, he sends others, captains, soldiers, artisans, and families, to fulfill his vision. The first expedition lands on the coast of modern-day North Carolina. They name the region Virginia, in honor of their Virgin Queen. And on a small island off the coast, Roanoke Island, they plant the first fragile seed of England's dream, a permanent colony in the New World. The first attempt in 1585 begins with optimism but ends in desperation. The men construct a fort, establish relations with local tribes, and explore inland territory. But mistrust grows quickly, supplies run low. Misunderstandings with the CROATOAN and CROATOAN peoples lead to bloodshed. The men grow desperate, stranded and starving in a land they do not understand. When the famous explorer Sir Francis Drake stops by on his way home from the Caribbean, he finds them broken and ready to abandon the settlement. He offers them passage back to England, and they accept. A few weeks later, a supply ship finally arrives from England, only to find the island empty. The dream postponed, but Raleigh refuses to see failure. To him, Roanoke remains a promise waiting to be fulfilled. And so, 2 years later, he tries again. The second attempt, in 1587, is not a mission of soldiers but of settlers, children. This time, the leader is John White, an artist, a cartographer, and a man of quiet determination. Among the 117 colonists who set sail with him is his daughter, Eleanor Dare, who is heavily pregnant. They intend to settle further north, in the Chesapeake Bay, where the land is more fertile. But the ship's pilot, impatient and unwilling to risk further travel, refuses to continue. Against orders, he leaves them on Roanoke Island, the same cursed ground that had already failed once before. It is August 1587 when they step ashore. The remains of the old fort are still there, weathered and overgrown. The air is heavy with memory. The settlers rebuild what they can, patching old walls, planting new crops, and trying to rekindle fragile alliances with nearby tribes. And then, just days later, something miraculous happens. Eleanor Dare gives birth to a daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. The colonists celebrate the child's birth as a sign of divine favor, but the wilderness is unforgiving, and hope fades as quickly as it came. Supplies run dangerously low. The surrounding tribes grow wary, some openly hostile. The settlers beg John White to sail back to England for help, to bring food, tools, and more people. He agrees, reluctantly, torn between duty and love, knowing he is leaving his family behind in an untamed world. When he departs, he promises to return quickly. As White reaches England, he finds a nation bracing for war. The Spanish Armada, a fleet of 130 ships, looms over the horizon. Every English vessel is seized for defense. No ship, no sailor, no coin can be spared for a colony across the sea. John White pleads for permission to return, but his voice is lost in the roar of war. It is not until 1590, 3 long years later, that White finally secures passage back to Roanoke. His heart is heavy, his imagination haunted by visions of what he might find. He lands on the island on August 18th, 1590, exactly 3 years to the day since he last saw his daughter and newborn granddaughter. The air is still. There are no signs of life. As White and his crew step ashore, a strange silence hangs over the settlement. The houses are gone, dismantled carefully, not destroyed. The fort's palisade stands empty, its gates open, and then, carved into one of the wooden posts, White sees a single word: CROATOAN. Another carving, found nearby, reads only CRO. White had told the colonists before he left that if they ever moved, they should carve the name of their new location, and if they were in danger, to add a cross beneath it. There is no cross, only the word. To John White, this means they must have relocated peacefully to CROATOAN Island. Relief surges through him. But fate intervenes once again. A storm builds offshore, violent and unrelenting. The rescue ship is damaged and forced to turn back before they can search the nearby islands. White never sees the colonists again. He returns to England, broken. He spends his remaining years consumed by guilt, never knowing what became of his daughter, his granddaughter, or the 115 souls he had left behind. And so begins the legend of the lost colony, a story that would become part of America's earliest myth, where history and mystery merge, and where the truth still waits, somewhere beneath the Carolina pines. The word CROATOAN lingers like an echo across time. Centuries later, it remains the only tangible clue left by more than 100 English men, women, and children who vanished into the wilderness. But what did it mean? When John White returned to England, the story of Roanoke began to fade from political memory. The nation turned its focus toward new colonies, fresh ventures, and more immediate victories. Yet, for historians and archaeologists, the silence of Roanoke became irresistible, a puzzle that refused to be forgotten. Some say the settlers moved south to CROATOAN Island, integrating with the local Croatan tribe, adapting to their ways, surviving in anonymity. Others insist something darker occurred, that they were attacked, enslaved, or scattered by rival tribes. And then there are the stories that stretch into the strange, the supernatural. Tales of curses, of hidden inscriptions, of phantom settlements glimpsed and lost again to the forest. For the settlers of Roanoke, the landscape itself must have felt alive, not in the way of familiarity, but of presence. The forest whispered in languages they could not understand. The night was filled with sounds that no one could name. They were surrounded by nations far older than their own, bound to the land through ancestry, through faith, through story. To survive here, they would have had to change, to listen, to adapt, to become something else entirely. The theory of assimilation, that the Roanoke settlers joined the Croatan or other Algonquian-speaking tribes, remains the most grounded explanation. When later English explorers reached the region in the early 1600s, they encountered Native American groups with gray eyes and unfamiliar words, fragments of English woven into their language. Some tribes claimed their ancestors had once lived among the white settlers. These accounts were scattered, secondhand, sometimes contradictory, but they hinted at an extraordinary possibility: that the lost colony never truly vanished, but was absorbed into a new world, their descendants walking quietly among those they once called strangers. If true, it would mean the Roanoke settlers didn't die out, they transformed. But history's silence invites darker imaginings. Some scholars believe that not all of the colonists survived such a transformation. Tensions between tribes, diseases, or starvation could have decimated their numbers. The 16th century coast was volatile, alliances shifting, resources scarce, European arrival bringing chaos and disease. There are whispers that the colonists tried to move inland toward the Chesapeake, where they were rumored to have been killed by hostile tribes. One account, told decades later by the Jamestown colonist William Strachey, spoke of a native chief who confessed that a group of men of white had lived in his region until they were destroyed for fear of rising power. The evidence is tenuous, oral, filtered through translation and bias, yet it offers a grim portrait: that the lost colony met its end not in mystery, but in massacre. Still, the human mind resists such closure. As centuries passed, Roanoke's mystery grew beyond history into legend. In the 1700s, tales spread of ghostly settlements seen in the Carolina woods, of English voices drifting through the fog, of crosses carved into tree trunks that no one could explain. Some claimed that the word CROATOAN itself carried supernatural weight, appearing carved into gallows, written in diaries, whispered at the edge of tragedy. Even the famous writer Edgar Allan Poe on his deathbed was said to have uttered that same word before he died. Coincidence or curse? The legend deepened. By the 19th century, Roanoke was no longer just a colonial failure. It had become America's first ghost story. Yet in modern times, science has tried to lift the veil. Archaeologists have returned to Roanoke and Hatteras with drones, soil analysis, and DNA testing. Excavations have revealed signs of multiple groups of English presence scattered along the coast, suggesting the colonists may have split up, attempting survival through different means. At one site, inland near the Chowan River, a fragment of a 16th century English signet ring was discovered. Near it, European pottery unlike anything traded with local tribes. Could this be evidence of a second settlement? A lost outpost where some of the colonists fled? And in recent years, technology uncovered a hidden clue long overlooked. In 2012, researchers examining John White's original map, La Virginia Pars, discovered a small patch of paper covering a symbol. Beneath it, drawn faintly in ink, was a blue and red star. The location marked a site roughly 50 miles west of Roanoke, exactly the distance the colonists had planned to move inland. White may have known more than history remembered. The area, now known as Site X, has become a focal point of investigation, a possible second colony built by survivors seeking refuge away from the coast. Artifacts found there date to the late 1500s, matching the timeline of Roanoke's disappearance. But so far, no graves, no documents, no names have been recovered. The silence endures. Perhaps that is what makes Roanoke's mystery so enduring. Not what we know, but what we don't. It stands at the threshold between two worlds, the world of record and the world of myth. A story born of ambition and ended in ambiguity. Maybe the settlers did survive, blending into native nations, raising new generations who carried fragments of English blood and language into the centuries. Maybe they died in the wilderness, their remains scattered and forgotten beneath the Carolina soil. Or perhaps their fate is something stranger still, something that history cannot touch. Whatever the truth, Roanoke remains a mirror, reflecting the human desire to reach beyond the known, to build, to belong, to leave a mark on the edge of the world. Every empire begins with a dream, and sometimes dreams vanish, not because they fail, but because they change shape. The lost colony may not be lost at all. It may simply be waiting, hidden not in the soil, but in the lineage of those who came after. The forests of North Carolina still whisper when the wind turns. The tides still lap against the sand where the fort once stood, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear the faint echoes of a language that once dreamed of empire, carried off by the wind into the vast, unknowable distance. CROATOAN.